These have been here for quite a while, but I only just noticed them. I think because of Laurie's tweet about like Neuralink but plugged into our gut. And I thought about Monica Gagliano's plants that talk to us. And I was also thinking about Richard Feynman talking about trees. He doesn't mention Aristotle, but he agrees with Aristotle that trees have their heads in the ground and their toes that wave up in the sky. So when these two trees communicate, which they're not going to do now because there's no wind at all, it's very still. But they're kind of playing footsie, and the sound down here is incredible. The thump that you get from, you wouldn't think it was such tiny branches. There's something really interesting about the acoustics. You'd never think that such slim branches touching like that would make such a deep thud, but it gets converted on the way down the tree, on the way up the tree, and by the time it gets to the roots it's a real boom. But the branches that are touching are really slender. I mean, that's not much more than an inch in diameter, but down here it makes a deep thud. It's really interesting. I also started watching something about Rupert Sheldrake talking about being a psychic, doing psychic research and things. And I don't know. I think logic accounts for an awful lot of these action at a distance, morphogenic phenomena, because we have this ability to abstract, and we can communicate in different concrete languages without having to agree beforehand what those languages are. And that's how children learn to speak, from each other at primary school. None of them have an authoritative dictionary, but they'll correct each other. So it's Peircean abduction, I think, is the key to everything. And that Peirce edition, I'm sure that Charles Sanders Peirce had a conscious knowledge that philosophers are all the same man, more or less, to the extent at which they do philosophy. And I think that's the key to understanding Aristotle's strange examples about mortality and the man and the musical man. I really don't think Aristotle's examples are random. I think they're calculated. But then I would think that. All these ponds are filling up brilliantly. And they did a whole lot of work over there, was cutting down holly and building fences around those other ponds, which are now all full. So there's one pond that's now over 6 feet deep. You could very easily drown in that, but I hope nobody does. I've got to jump this. Much milder weather. I listened to that Terrace Tower. The first time through I could barely bring myself to carry on listening to it. It just filled me with such a sense of kind of panic, as I felt like he was really struggling to get out 1% or one fraction of 1% of what he was actually thinking while he was saying it. But once I got used to that, it's okay, that's a really good talk. But I think a nice place to start would be a two-dimensional wave on a closed spherical surface, and then you see the dispersion. Well, I don't know if you see the dispersion. I'm so out of that whole stuff. I had to look up what the wave equation was. It's so long since I looked at that stuff. But if you imagine a water world and dropping a pebble in the North Pole, and the ripple spreads out until the equator, and the inverse square law gives you this diminishing power because it's spread over a large area. But as soon as it reaches the equator, it becomes a wave focused at the South Pole, and then all that energy, if it's a superfluid helium-4 planet somewhere, then it all finds itself in a time reversal in the southern hemisphere, and the whole history of the thing is wound back on itself, and then it plops again. But once you have continents and human beings moving ships around, then that stuff's never going to happen on a planet. But you do get things like this Point Nemo, which seems to focus sound right across the Pacific or something. That must be a similar effect, because it's very much more complicated, because there's the lens of the ocean as regards sound is much more complicated, but in principle it's just a lens. It's going to focus, it's going to have caustics, sonic version of caustics that show up in certain places, and I've forgotten what else I was going to say. Yeah, this simple observation that if you the ancient civilizations that had to cross the Pacific only had to know how to travel in a straight line in some sense, because you pretty much arrive, Pacific being almost half the circumference of the Earth at its widest point. You go in a straight line, you get to roughly the same place once you arrive at the other side. This is showing much brighter than it actually is now. There, look, all that holly they piled up. Looks like a hedgerow now. There's plenty left over for wreaths.